So happy to have on our show, I think possibly for the second or third time, and every time we're grateful, the UFC women's bantamweight contender, silver medalist in the Olympics in freestyle wrestling, the awesome Sara McMann. Welcome back to the show, Sara.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm glad. So glad to talk to you. And I was really excited to watch your last performance. I know you were an underdog. Both myself and my producer said, I think Sara McMann's got this. In fact, I think I don't like to tag people too much to cause you guys all kinds of overload in your email, but I know that we put it up there and said Sara McMann's got this, and you killed it. That was such an important fight. Did you feel more pressure in that fight going into it than other fights, or what was your mindset going into that fight as far as your thoughts about the importance of a victory and relevance for your career?
So I think that each of the fights, I feel probably like the same amount of pressure. Ever since I've been really young, I've always put a lot of pressure on myself. So I don't think it's felt any more significant or less significant. If I was going to say if anyone felt a little more pressure in my life, it would probably be the one right after having my son. I feel like that one was a really important one to get a win. Just to kind of prove to myself that even though I had a baby, and I was older, that I could still go out there and contend with these girls.
Who was that opponent?
It was Lena Landsberg.
Right, and you did have a really good performance there, huh?
Yeah, she's a really good Muay Thai girl. And she'd also beat other people that beat other grapplers and did good stuff on the cage and good grappling. So she's become a lot more well-rounded, but she, obviously I think she probably prefers the striking where she, started her career.
Absolutely. With your previous fight before this last one against Carol Hossa, you went against the now champion Juliana Pena. Off of that performance in a good fight that you didn't win, but that you had some great moments in, did you have, or how surprised or were you surprised that Juliana beat the champ Amanda Nunes, or did you feel something in that fight with her that made you not that surprised?
No, I was kind of surprised. I thought it would still be a little bit harder for her to take it to the ground. When I fought Amanda, she had I take her down too, but it was work, so she's really not as easy to take down as she was in the fight against Pena. Probably will make some adjustments, but I thought her game plan when she was like, oh, I heard some things where she was like, oh yeah, I'll stand and strike with her, and I was like, I don't think that's a good idea,
Yeah.
So I was wrong, obviously. She stood and struck with her, but I think that that can always go both ways.
Absolutely.
That could have. So I just don't think it's a smart tactic for anybody, not even Amanda. So
right, no, absolutely true. And there's a lot of talk that was kind of an off night for Amanda, but I guess we'll find out in the rematch. But more importantly, off of that fight, you were coming in against Carol Hossa, and she's younger and this up-and-coming prospect. And I just remember when I was thinking about the matchup, because not only do we do interviews, but we always like to look out for good openings for betting. We don't advocate betting for people that don't have money. We don't advocate betting for fighters. We don't advocate betting, period. But if people are already going to be sports betting, since we've been watching for so many years, for me before the first UFC, we do sometimes break down fights and give our opinions. And so I remember in the matchup with you and Carol Hossa, you were a slight underdog in that fight. I remember thinking that the odds makers are feeling that off of a loss to Juliana Pena, Carol Hossa beats you. And I remember thinking, I'm not seeing that. I remember thinking that doesn't add up to 1 + 1 equals 2. It's almost like saying if I beat my producer, he beats me in a fight, then we can all of a sudden fight in the UFC. There's no right. You know what I mean? There's no sense to that or any truth in that. And I remember thinking that. I just think almost like the odds makers were looking at that. Once in a while, I wonder if a lot of these odds makers are in their 20s and 30s, these handicappers. Probably not all of them, but and it seems like a lot of them feel that if you're over 30 2, you can't fight, So I think that just, they missed the boat on that one because you looked really good. But yeah, you were motivated, you were focused. I guess you did say it didn't mean any more or less than any other fight, but that was an important fight, and I think that you just looked really, really good. I know that you're an elite athlete, having been in the Olympics and having grappled your whole life. You look better than all these girls that are in their 20s and 30s. I know that sometimes the older we get, the harder it is cardio wise, and you got to train like crazy to be able to have the same cardio. But you grew up with that training. You've trained like that all your life. But it just looked like the only concern some people may have had was if your cardio failed on you. Did you have any concern on that, or was that a big part of your focus for your camp, or was that not even really a thought?
No, it definitely has been a thought. And I spoke in another interview about it, but I learned actually it's a really wonderful thing that USADA does, because they take blood tests as well, and they informed me that before, like over the past year, they took my blood and before I fought Pena, and then they took a blood test again before again in January, and like I had really low hemoglobin.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know. And so they flagged it and they told me about it because they thought like, well, there might be like an underlying condition. Well, it turns out that I did. I was like, if you do a lot of really hard, stressful training, then you can have anemia, like low iron.
Right.
So my hemoglobin being low means that my body, my blood is not transporting oxygen from my lungs to my muscles as well as it should. Which, if anybody doesn't know, oxygen is 100% your gas tank.
Yeah.
So, I found out this like several months before my fight, and so I just started taking iron supplements. And I'm really thankful. Like Thorne sent me some iron supplements. And man, it's like a night and day difference. So like I train and I've been doing conditioning and I've been investing all this time into having better cardio, which I have my whole life because I hate getting tired in wrestling matches or in fights.
Yeah.
But I was like putting water in a bucket with holes, like it just, no matter what, if if I couldn't carry the blood to my muscles, they were going to fatigue. So once I fixed that, man, like I've been doing so much better. And so it really like kind of breaks my heart because I wish that I had learned this earlier. And so I think that all fighters, like they should go and get their blood tested and make sure that, that they don't have anemia from training really hard year round for so long, and that they don't have, other things. You can have a thyroid problem that can be hurting your weight cutting. I mean, there's like different little things that you can change in your diet. And I mean, at this level, it makes a humongous difference. So that was the focus. And once I corrected that, it took about a month of having it in my system. My cardio like has been phenomenal since then. And so like, that's why I'm like, okay, I'll fight. I want to fight these top girls. I know I fixed one of the problems in my, in my fight game. And now I want to take on all of them and I want to rematch Pena.
Love it. I love it. And for people that don't know or don't get it, obviously in the internet generation now, all someone has to do is go on and Google this. But for people that don't want to Google it yet, I know a former athlete who's a senior citizen now, and he was hospitalized during the pandemic. And one of the things that happened when he got out was that his hemoglobin was so low that it became hard for him to even turn over in bed or walk. And so it's a legitimate thing. If your hemoglobin is low, that is absolutely serious and can cause some major problems. And we're cheering for him to get better, and that's all that needs to happen. Unfortunately for you, being much younger than a senior citizen, it wasn't the same issue that you couldn't walk, but I could absolutely see how it was affecting you. And yeah, I know what you're saying. If we could turn back the clock and could have made these adjustments in life, but fortunately you got it here, and it's not 5 years from now that you found out when you were training people in the gym, or if you were retired, not that you will be, but yeah, that's huge, because yeah, it just, you just kept going, you know what I mean? Like it didn't seem like you hit the wall, at all, like in some of the last few fights.
Yeah, I definitely like, I hit the wall, and like, I was super frustrated that all the work I was putting in didn't seem to have the effect that it should have, which is I had my whole life. But it's funny that you say that he was hospitalized during the pandemic because um, a little over 2 months before my fight with Pena, I got COVID.
Oh wow.
Only down for like a week and a half. Like it was like a very, and I felt like but I had chronic fatigue, and I think my anemia, I think that it started at that point. I think that I just thought, oh, well, COVID kind of makes you tired, but I can just kind of like work through it. And I did to like a large degree. I definitely got a lot better. But when we were supposed to fight on December 19th, and when she asked to have the fight pushed back to January 23rd or whatever, I was really thankful for that. It actually helped me, gave me another month because I was really struggling in practices. But it was such a good opportunity. I didn't want to lose the fight. So I was like, really stubbornly hanging on to it. But I think that that's when I really started to struggle with the anemia. And I think I had chronic fatigue for like 8 months. But I still was able to train. I still was able to make improvement. But in between practices, I felt like, man, I was like hit by a bus. Like it was really tough.
Yeah. And you had, and it just made you feel that, like, what the hell? Because even though you're, no longer in your 20s and just recently out of your 30s, it still shouldn't be that all of a sudden you're feeling exhausted. I mean, your training ethic, you're an elite athlete, an Olympian, and I'm sure it didn't make a lot of sense because you were looking at yourself and you were looking probably at other people, who are not all done like right at 40 or 41. It shouldn't be that all of a sudden you're gassed when you train. So, although, but it definitely had to be frustrating because you didn't know. You were probably thinking, hey, I guess it's an individual thing. And is it maybe somehow all of a sudden my cardio is going to be cut in half, right at 41 or something like that, which just wouldn't make any sense. And I'm glad you're right. I'm glad you found out what it was, because that's huge. Because that obviously was involved in some of your performances. But yeah, that was just such a cool thing because you really look like the Sara McMann of the past. There wasn't any gassing. You were focused. You were fired up. And you know what? It may have surprised her because it's funny. When a fighter is losing a fight, a lot of times they look kind of frustrated and confused. And I guess that's kind of a natural thing, but do you think there was a part of her that was wondering how come your cardio wasn't giving out? Or do you think there was any surprise on her part? Like, wait a second, this is supposed to get easier here with Sara after round one. Why isn't it?
So I think that might have been like they might have mistakenly thought that was now the new norm for me. But I think also the fact that like I was never, really put on the defense. I was attacking from every single area you put me in. And I've been working that like extensively. Like I've been working that for years, but for some reason I had not been able to like do that in the cage like I had been able to do in training. And I really don't know. There always is a gap with every athlete between sometimes what you do in training and what you're able to do in competition.
Yep.
And we always are trying to like shorten that gap more and more and more to where what you like the awesome person, the awesome competitor that you are in training shows up in the fight. And like I feel like I finally had a good breakthrough in this fight. Like finally some of the things I've been like killing myself to do, like they were there for me and they were revealed. So it makes me trust myself a lot more, and it makes me like even just more excited to get out there and do even more.
Absolutely, and it should, because she was a high ranked competitor. I think she had won like all of her fights. I think in the UFC, I think she was like 5-0, and it just she was kind of like big sistering a lot of her opponents, and and you big sistered her. Which was so cool. She probably was thinking like, WTF, wait a second, I'm the big sister. What's going on here? And then you big sister, the big sister. That was really cool. But it seems like it was definitely a competitive fight, and yeah, but you look great. Now you're training? I know you're originally from South Carolina, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And you trained out of there, but then you went to Alpha Male, and where are you now? Sorry to interrupt you, but where are you training now, and who you're working with?
So the rash guard I'm wearing, Precision Academy. So I opened my own gym. And we have jiu-jitsu with my husband, and then I teach the wrestling, and then we hired Coach DJ Robertson to do our Muay Thai. So when I left Alpha Male, I mean, we had two of the components in the gym, and we just had to bring in like a really good striking coach to be able to kind of complete that. And So I have really good partners, but it's a smaller gym, and we all just like really like take care of each other and look out for each other. And when anybody has a fight coming, like we all like mimic that person's opponent, and we just pool all of our skills and help each other out.
I like that. What percentage of your training partners are men, and what percentage are women? Would you
So I say I usually train like more like 3/4 with guys, just from the partners, and then maybe like 1/4 with women. But we have some really awesome women in our club. So like we have like a girl just won like the Master Worlds at purple belt, and then we have a black belt silver medalist at World Championships in the adult. I mean, like we have some pretty tough ladies, and but they're more in the jiu-jitsu side. The people we have in the MMA, the girls are more like young up and comers, but they're talented and they're hungry, and so they don't they don't give me too much respect. They try to win, and so it's good when you're competing with people who are trying to beat you every go.
Absolutely, iron sharpens iron. They say it. Some people say it's steel sharpens steel, but I think the original saying was iron sharpens iron. I think isn't it?
I think it's iron sharpens iron. That's what I've always heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Would it matter to you if you had the women there or not? I mean, obviously, everyone that you train with gives you a different look. But would it matter to you? Was it something purposeful that you wanted? And throughout your career in MMA, has that been the case where there's always been some women but a majority men that you train with?
No, so I always try to train with women. One, it's important to have like a more of an even playing field. So you can really test more in real time whether or not your stuff works, because a guy who's going a little bit lighter is not a good representation of another strong female.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't really like, they can't move like a female. They're not like as flexible. And in jiu-jitsu, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Finishing your submissions, but the submissions that they can attack. Flexibility, I mean, they can, you could have mount and they can wrap their legs around, and like, one of the most dominant positions they can get out of. Like they're just able to move in a way that really, really helps them in jiu-jitsu. So having female partners, especially like very savvy female partners, it gives me like the best feel, like the best that any MMA fighter could expose me to.
Very cool. What do you feel has improved the most? Because obviously you always had your wrestling, but obviously staying, keeping it sharp and polished is something that you have to do to an extent. But obviously the mission that you had from the beginning in MMA, as anyone with your wrestling credentials, of which there are very few in the world of MMA, would want to improve striking and jiu-jitsu. How do you feel about your striking and jiu-jitsu as compared to, say, 10 years ago? And how do you feel they are as compared to where you want them to be?
So I think I'm probably just really hard on myself, and I will always want them to be better. So it doesn't matter, like I just won that fight, I'm already like, oh man, I need to do this better, and oh, I want to control this better, and I already have a list of things that I need to work on to make that performance even better and definitely get the finish. I'd say that like the real difference that I feel now is I'm more comfortable in being able to blend the styles. Like I can use jiu-jitsu and striking together. I can use wrestling and striking together better than I've ever been able to do. And like before, I feel like sometimes I was in like, I could do one thing and then there'd just be like a little hiccup between going to the next thing. And, like those little seconds are enough opportunity for people to exploit, especially if they've done MMA their whole life and not done the individual sports. So now I kind of feel like I have like a much better sense of being able to like just seamlessly blend those things without those little hiccups.
Absolutely. And I think that with your wrestling being so good, I think getting your jiu-jitsu good was definitely a milestone, because I think it was like about 5, 6, and 7 years ago or something like that. May have been a little more or a little bit less. You actually were doing some jiu-jitsu competitions. Was that around that time?
I still do. Last year I went to the Boise Open, and this year I plan on doing more jiu-jitsu competitions. I just enjoy competing. So if I'm healthy, I want to get out there. I won't do it too close to a fight just because I'm nervous of injury. But But if it's more than like if it's 6 weeks out, I'll go to like a high level jiu-jitsu competition. Just because I don't know, like I just like to compete. I like going head to head with these girls, especially when I'm like, okay, I'm 41 and I don't do jiu-jitsu exclusively. I
Right.
do MMA. So like
Right.
I feel like there's less pressure on me, even though there might be more pressure because of my accolades. But for me, I'm like, no, these girls do this full time. Like they have the pressure on them. They're younger. They have the advantages. Like they have every reason to win. So whenever I can go out there and take it from them, I'm like, okay, I can do this, in my MMA fights. I can do it so much better because most of the girls are not as developed in their jiu-jitsu, like exception is like a McDern or, some of their girls that transferred from jiu-jitsu. But if I can do it exclusively against girls who are doing just that, then I think that proves to me that I can do it against anybody in the MMA world.
I like that, and I think you're absolutely correct. What weight class or classes would you normally compete at jiu-jitsu?
So I do 147, and that's like my walking around weight.
Right.
So I don't really have to do anything. I just have to make sure that I don't like overeat or drink water more. But if I just do my regular workouts, then I can walk into a jiu-jitsu competition at 147 without a problem.
And then probably a lot of those girls you'll be going against might be like 160 on the day of the match, but that doesn't bother you probably, right?
No, it doesn't bother me.
Now, you probably just recently went from what, Masters 1 to Masters 2, or would it be Masters 2 to Masters 3?
I compete in adult.
An adult. Oh, good, because I was going to say, it just seems like it would be almost unfair for you to be competing in like a Masters 2 or something that you would just probably smash these women your age or older, right? You know what I mean? So I'm glad, because I was thinking that would be kind of possibly ugly.
So I usually enter adult mainly because there's just more competitors there.
Yeah.
Because some of the girls, like, I mean, there are 41-year-olds out there just like me. And I went against a girl, I was at Marcelo's, and she was an older woman, and she was a black belt, and she's like, oh, like, I'm older. And I said, don't try that with me. And she was strong and savvy, and,
Right.
she went out there and she was on the attack. So I was like, you're old, but jiu-jitsu old is different, you
Right.
know?
Yep, exactly. It's true. As long as you're doing it and you're getting in there and grinding, it's definitely a great sport and a great thing to do. Let me ask you this. From all the training you've done and the wrestling training for so many years at such a high level, no one doubts that your body and your condition is accumulation of all that hard work. But sometimes we see some bodies on some of these girls that are 26 or 28 that are not decorated wrestlers, and they look like they're just ripped to shreds with their shoulders popping out. And some people start thinking, is this, I mean, are some people cheating, unfortunately? And obviously it's a weird question, and certainly I'm not going to ask you to say what girls do you think are cheating, but are there any girls you think in MMA that are getting by the testing somehow just by some luck?
Absolutely. And I'm sure it's not luck. I'm sure that they are doing things that like sometimes I hear that there are things that the drug testing like hasn't found yet, so they don't pick up on it. And sometimes people do cycles. I don't really know a lot, but I can tell you unequivocally there are people cheating.
Yeah.
And I've actually fought opponents, and sometimes it's like people I beat, and sometimes it's people that I haven't. And I've had some of their teammates message me personally, and I won't say who, but like, and say, hey, I don't know if this, helps or not, like if this, how you feel, but they definitely are doing PEDs.
Yeah.
And it kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like, man, like you can really do some bad damage in MMA,
Yeah.
in boxing and kickboxing, and any of the striking sports. You really could like damage somebody for life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it is some of those girls too. Like I can't always tell who is on and who isn't. And mainly I can't tell because I hear some people tested positive, like Brian Ortega tested positive,
Right.
and he didn't look ripped
No.
and shredded,
No,
like,
never.
and so I'm like, man, like, and some people who are ripped and shredded, like they might just really have like really great genetics, or
Right.
have put in I've been doing this for 27 years, you know, like
Right.
it takes 27 years for PEDs to work. I think you're probably getting ripped off.
Yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. Do you think it's more? Do you think it's? I'm sorry to step on your words. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You can go
Okay.
ahead.
Do you think it's more egregious in women's combat sports when someone is really juiced to the gills?
No, I think it's egregious with men too.
Okay.
I equally dislike when they do because you have more power or more endurance or something that you didn't earn. Like morally, I don't think it's okay. I don't want to know or be friends with or support anybody who cheats.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but also like, even more than that, like you could people have died in MMA,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and like or brain damage or altered their life. And you say, yeah, we signed the waiver, but we kind of signed the waiver expecting somebody to be, an even playing ground and like it to be fair. That's what we sign up for.
Yeah.
Or else they should start a cheater league and then they can go and just bash each other's brains in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
those are clean. Like for me, I had to mentally kind of get past it. Because I had a lot of bitterness, like I had a lot of bitterness and anger towards people who were doing that. And I'm like, if it gets to a certain point, I really feel like a lot of my opponents are cheating or doing PDs. I'll just retire. I'll just,
Yeah.
because I don't know, it's not worth it. It's not
Yeah.
worth it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Michael Bisping has a lot of his opponents that were on TRT. Now, at one point, the TRT was allowed for certain fighters. Like everyone's talked about Vitor on TRT and not on TRT. Other people, the differences, and I guess when it was permitted, then that it was different. Although it still gave people an advantage. I mean, speaking of which, in a slightly different subject. Some fighters were able to continue well into their 40s at a really high level because of TRT back in the day, and it was permitted. And right, and I think what it said was, hey, look, if you're 43, 45, 47 years old and your testosterone levels, let's say as a man, are this much lower, let's just bring them to where they were like when you were 35 so that you can compete. And I remember basically a lot of people felt, what's wrong with that? Why is that not fair? But then a lot of the younger fighters were saying, why should that be allowed? Why should this guy be able to have his testosterone like when he was 35, when he's 45? What would your thought be on that?
You do have all that experience with less of the drawback. So when it was this is the way I looked at it. When it was legal and in the rules, if people chose to use it, it's in the rules. We all understand what we're going into, so you know that you could fight a very experienced fighter that has testosterone levels of somebody younger. But I am glad that they did do away with that because that's more in line with how they do in like the Olympics. And there's a reason why the Olympics also did that. Like they want people to be as natural as possible.
Yeah.
And there are repercussions. Like the thing is that some people can do a lot more than just bringing it back to the levels that are natural.
Right.
And it becomes a huge advantage as well.
Yeah, I remember the thing with Alistair, and he fought clean for many, many years, but when he was fighting in Europe and Japan, no one was clean, and no one was asked to be clean. And I remember the trial, they said that the acceptable amount of testosterone levels for a man would somehow be like maybe 3 to 1 of what would be normal, and then I think he had 15 to 1, and he was saying it was eating a lot of horse meat or something like that, So
another problem is that when people would do like steroids, I think that like when it would raise their testosterone. I might be slaughtering this, but I think that this is what it was, and then their estrogen levels would rise a lot because of that. Like because it balances itself out, and that's why when they stop doing the steroids, because I think you have to like get off of them. You can't do them like all the time. It's pretty damaging to your body. Then that's why they would get like like man boobs and stuff like that.
Right.
So they were using the testosterone replacement to kind of slowly bring those levels back into check. So it was another way to like take advantage of steroids and not suffer the repercussions. And so I'm glad that they did away with that.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you may not know, I don't know if you were ever a bodybuilding fan or anything, but years ago I was always into combat sports and working out. I remember in the late 90s, in women's bodybuilding, they were taking it to like the highest level of insanity where women were having like 3% body fat. I think there was a woman that won 2 Miss Olympias, Kim Chizevsky, that was it was absolutely insane. And I think they made a ruling in like 1998 for women's safety that said we're not going to allow this sort of a look anymore. We're not going to reward it. If women come in looking like this, we're gonna score you last. And
but there's a lot of cheating in that sport.
Yeah,
it's still rampant with it. And so like that's one thing that's hard is like if you get into a sport like that, your choices are cheat or don't do it.
Right.
There really is no other option. And I kind of feel bad. And I know that they have like quote unquote natural bodybuilding competitions, but even people enter the natural bodybuilding competitions and still cheat. So it's like, man, like some people you're just never going to, I don't know, influence them. Like they'll find a way around the rules if they're really intent on it. And so that's sad.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Well, we got about 5 minutes left with you, Sarah. I want to get your opinion on a few other women's fights. So first, before I do, you don't have anything signed as of yet. That would be really quick, right?
No, but I'm aiming for it, but not yet.
Nice. Let us know. I'm sure when you do, you're going to have all kinds of media demand, but just know that we'd always love to have you on to help you promote your upcoming fight. Okay, so women's fights coming up this Saturday. What a card we have this Saturday. Crazy good fights. Headlined, I think the headliner is it Peter? No, it's which is the headline? Is it Jan and it's not Jan and Sterling, or is it? Do you know what the main in this weekend is?
I'm not sure.
I think yeah. Sorry about that.
I don't. No, it's okay. Cause so I thought
Volkanovski. Sorry, Volkanovski and Zombie. My producer just pulled it up. Yes, sorry to step on your words. So what a card. We got Volkanovski, Korean Zombie. We got Piotr Jan, Aljamain Sterling 2, Hamzat Chimaev, Gilbert Burns. The 2 women's fights include 2 partners for many years, Tisha Torres and Raquel Pennington, both fighting on the same card. That's got to make them happy. The training they can give each other is amazing. Quick question. Can a smaller girl that fights at 115 and her partner fights at 135 give each other a lot of good looks or not really?
I think so. I think that Raquel Pennington probably has like really good control. And so she's not gonna do something that would damage her partner. And also like Tisha, I bet you she helps Raquel's with the speeds. Tisha's super fast.
Yeah.
So like going with smaller partners because I feel like they're faster than the girls at 135. So like when I go back to my weight class, I can see things coming a lot quicker. So I mean, I'm sure they've been training together for a really long time. And so I bet you they do, like having somebody in house. Like I'm married to a jiu-jitsu black belt. So we'll be on our carpet. I'm like, hey, come here. I gotta get this defense or this submission and stuff. So I think it really helps having somebody in your sport at your house.
Absolutely.
At your
Absolutely, that makes sense. So, question for you. Tisha Torres, Mackenzie Dern. Talk about a throwback UFC fight, grappler and striker. Obviously, both are not, this is not like 20 years ago where the Tisha would be only a striker that knew nothing about takedowns or jiu-jitsu, and the grappler would be a jiu-jitsu person that knew nothing about anything but jiu-jitsu. Both these girls know about MMA, and they're balanced, mixed martial artists, at least to a pretty good extent. We look at that fight and we say, if Mackenzie had Sara McMann wrestling, this fight would probably be all over in favor of Mackenzie Dern. But she doesn't. So what she's going to try to do is show her hands. She's got some power. She's going to try to throw hands with Tisha, maybe catch Tisha or have Tisha backing off because of how hard she hits, and then catch her in a scramble. Tisha is going to try to not allow that and try to keep it on the feet the whole time and just piece up Mackenzie Dern. What do you think happens in that fight, in a prediction, if you have one, if you're on the fence? I understand.
That's a really tough fight to call. It is. I think that I'm gonna lean. Gosh, this is tough because I really like both fighters, so
Yeah.
I hate calling these different fights.
Yep.
Um, but if I have to lean on who has the potential more to finish it, I would say that'd be Mackenzie. If she gets her down, like I think Mackenzie's skills are way superior.
Yeah, on the ground if it goes there.
Would have to probably like she has to control the range every single second of the fight, and that's really tough to do in a cage. If this fight were like on a football field, I would give it to Tisha Torres. You
Yeah.
know, like,
Yeah.
but man, like being able to crash that distance. Uh, if I would say like if Tisha had more knockouts, I would say Mackenzie would have to be a lot smarter trying to come in. So I don't know. Like I hold on one second.
No problem.
Can you still see me?
No.
Okay, hold on.
No problem.
All right. Sorry, I had an incoming call.
No problem
Okay.
at all. I appreciate you. Yeah.
So I would lean slightly favored towards Mackenzie
Right.
just because of her finishing capability.
Gotcha.
But this is, I mean, like Tisha is no slouch in every single area, and I think if any of the fighters that she's fought have the capability of keeping range and not letting it get taken down, Tisha's probably one of the best.
Absolutely.
Like, a super intelligent range and a lot of motion, she can strike you backing up. Like that's a really, really tough fight to call.
Absolutely, I agree. We've only got 1 minute left with you, Sarah. Can you give me 30 seconds on the other fight, Raquel Pennington, Aspen Ladd? And I was wondering, could that fight be at 45? But I don't think so, no matter how much they want Aspen to be at 45. I don't think Raquel was agreeing for a 45 fight when she's still a top contender at 35. So I'm assuming this has to be 35. Let me know yes or no, and then a 30-second breakdown on that fight.
So I don't know either because Raquel took it on short notice. So it could be 45 just because she stepped in last minute.
Okay.
And I think that fight, like Raquel actually has a really, really good ability to stop takedowns. She's tough to take down, and she's proven that against like some pretty good grapplers. So I think this one I lean a little bit more towards Raquel just because she's got better hands and she's good on the cage and she's good at stopping takedowns.
Awesome. Well, Sara McMann, thank you so much for joining us off this great win. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to see you fight again. I'm so glad you got that problem with the hemoglobin fixed because that really is huge. And I just can't wait to see the best Sara McMann going forward. I know you're going to kill it. And what an amazing story it would be if you could put UFC gold around your waist. That would be one of the feel-good moments, I think, in the history of MMA. You're such a nice person and a hard worker, and I really want to thank you so much for joining us here in the MMA Power Hour. And just keep up the great work. We really will keep cheering for you, and I appreciate you a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate it.